If you listen to today's episode, you will have a much better chance to hook more and larger fish on your next Stillwater trip. That's because I'm going to provide a Phil Rowley summary of his top tips for inducing a strike, and I'll have a little story to share at the end that's going to reinforce this message. Hey, I'm Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a little kid. I grew up around a fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. I've also interviewed more of the greatest fly anglers around streams and still waters than just about anyone out there. In today's short snippet bonus episode, we're going to hear Phil Rowley's 8 tips on inducing a fish take. This podcast today comes from episode 640, where Phil was on his Littoral Zone podcast and he shared these exact tips and more. If you want to hear the full-length episode, check out 640. This is going to be a short snippet episode just so you have a punch just in case you missed that one or you want something a little bit shorter. And I know I've been hearing from people out there that that's potentially what we're looking for. But before I get into the 8 tips, I want to share a quick story. So Phil and I were on the water. I think this was our first time and only time so far on the water. And we were fishing a small lake up in Canada. And we were out there at the lodge. It was an amazing lodge. And I can't remember if it was the first day or the second day, but I found myself in the boat with Phil. It was me and Phil, and I'm not sure how the stars all lined up. I felt pretty lucky to be out there, but Phil and I put in the boat and we motored across, and there was another boat in the group on the lake. We motored across to, it was kind of the mid-lake. There was a little point out there, and we went there and we anchored up, got it all set up, and we got we got the indicators set up and we started fishing, and it was my first chance to understand basically indicators and how critical that was to be able to get to the right zone of the fish. And we adjusted things a little bit until we found that zone and we started getting fish to take. And eventually Phil got one and he brought it in, did a stomach sample. We pumped the stomach, and which basically just kind of flushes water there. We looked at what it was eating, which were tons of chironomids. And we basically said, hey, here you go. Here's exactly what they're eating right now, because this is the food they just had eaten. So we knew what to put on. We put on that, and then we proceeded to get down to the right depth because we were doing that systematically. We used the indicator, so all we had to do was cast out there, let it drop down and sit, and we had a ton of action that day. So I just wanted to use this story to reinforce what we're going to be talking about today, which is Phil's 8 tips on inducing a strike. And there's some other things in here that we're going to, this is going to be a quick one. So we're going to leave out some things that Phil covered in that episode. Again, you can go to episode 640 if you want to get the full length and hear detail. But let's start it out. Let's jump right in right now and let's get these tips. Here we go. Tip number 1, tippet ring connection to the fly line. So Phil said, use tippet ring connection lines to replace traditional welded loops, ensuring a smoother and more reliable connection, especially when fishing with long leaders in Stillwater. So this is pretty cool. He talked about this. Rio has this new tippet ring, and he talks about it in the episode, but basically Phil's been working with Rio on this, and it's out there right now. So if you want to check that out, he discusses how, this just allows for a smoother transition when you're fishing, more of a connection. So check out these tippet rings. And that's a good first tip. Okay, so tip number 2 is rod positioning. Phil says, keep your rod tip low or even submerged in the water to maintain a direct contact with your fly, which is essential for detecting subtle takes. Again, a lot of times I think, we're sitting there holding the rod out or up or higher, but you want to keep it in the water. That's going to allow you to feel those tiny takes, right? And that's sometimes there's not going to be much on the end. Okay, number 3, hand twist retrieve. Phil says, master the hand twist retrieve for a versatile, slow presentation that mimics the natural movements of aquatic insects. So instead of doing maybe a just strip, you can kind of do that twist retrieve, which makes it more natural, right? So the fish, the insect is coming up smoothly, maybe it's stopping. So remember the hand twist retrieve. All right, tip number 4, strip retrieve variation. So this is a critical one that I've heard Phil talk a lot about, but experiment with different strip retrieve variations, such as long, slow pulls, or short, quick strips to match the behavior of different prey species. So again, this just goes back to not using the same strip every time. So I think I find myself in the past doing that, where it's like, okay, strip, like I said, strip, maybe it's strip a long pull, but feel free to really mix it up and find out what works. And once you find out what works, do that and definitely make notes of what you're doing, the time of day and all that. So next time you're on the water, you can have more success. All right, tip number 5, this is fan casting technique. So Phil says, fan cast to cover a broad area by casting in a clock-like pattern from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock positions, ensuring your fly reaches various depths and angles. So in our example, we were doing this. So we were in the boat, we were anchored up, and we had what we thought was the right depth, and we started casting out, and we were covering that area, and then we were slowly, Phil was kind of in the back of the boat, I was in the front, and we were covering the whole area around the boat. So we can find out maybe there's some structure down there, maybe there's something where those fish were holding. And eventually, if you're systematic about it and there's fish down there, you will find them if you do this. So that's a great reminder. Tip 5, fan casting. Trout Routes is the most comprehensive mapping app for trout anglers. With over 50,000 trout streams, 350,000 access points, public land maps, and more, Trout Routes is the #1 resource for navigating, researching, and exploring trout streams. You can download Trout Routes for free in the App Store today. Just search for Trout Routes on your phone and take your exploration to the next level. That's Trout Routes, TROUTROUTES. Unleash your fly fishing potential with Togen's Fly Shop. Discover their premium products, including fly tying materials, hooks, and a wide range of tying and fishing gear trusted by anglers since 2005. Shop now and make this year your best with their expert tutorials and top quality gear. Visit togensflyshop.com right now. You can support a great shop and this podcast by checking out Togens right now. All right, tip number 6, swing tipping. It says, Phil says, watch the tip of your fly line during the retrieve for any unusual movements, as these can indicate a fish has taken the fly promptly, and then you can promptly make a quick hook set. And so watching the tip of your fly line, right? So you're stripping in, you're doing whatever. If it does something, different, if it's on the water and it just hesitates, it could be very subtle. That's what you need to do to set the hook. So a lot of times I think people don't realize that there's something down there because it can be subtle. All right, here we go. Number 7, and this kind of goes to our story, use indicators. I was trying to highlight this in the top story, which is that you can use indicators. And if you haven't done it yet, Phil has a bunch of resources here on this podcast, Littoral Zone. Just search for Littoral Zone podcast and you'll see some of these episodes. But he says, incorporate strike indicators to control depth and retrieve speed, especially when fish are less active, making it easier to detect subtle bites. So there you go. So it allows you to control depth and retrieve speed. And that's what's great about it. So under an indicator, you can still retrieve and it'll stay kind of in that zone, right? So we talked about the story where we were out there on the boat with Phil and we had some success. That was mainly because we were following this systematic approach. All right, and the number 8 tip today is lock style fishing. And Phil says, utilize lock style fishing techniques with a drogue to control your drift and present your flies to fresh fish in a controlled manner. So this is something I haven't done yet. I'm definitely going to be doing this. But Phil's talked a lot about this. This is a great method for covering water instead of, I think of the old school, like way back when I started, was trolling, right? Which does work. But lock style fishing, I believe, works much better. And there's a reason why competitive anglers are doing this method. So that's it. So that's tip number 8. I did have a couple of bonuses here. And so those are the top 8 tips. I am going to throw in a little more. This is kind of on the same thing, but wind drifting. And Phil said, take advantage of wind-induced current by wind drifting or moving the strike zone, allowing your flies to cover more water without dragging to the bottom. So wind drifting, right? So that's another little bonus tip we're going to throw in here. And then we had a couple of takeaways as well. Okay, I think I'm going to leave you with Phil, and this is what he says a lot. Continuous learning. So I'm going to leave that here right now. Fly fishing is a constant learning process. Regularly refining your techniques and staying open to new methods will improve your success and enjoyment on the water. And this is just a great reminder because I think a lot of us get stuck in the things we've done, maybe stuff that's worked, and we're not willing to step out of the box and try something new. And that's the hope here, is that we all keep experimenting and keep learning. All right, those are the tips for today. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, you can go to episode 640 if you want to check that out, episode 640, you can get the full this episode. So more than my summary here, you'll get more detail on each of those and some more tips there. So definitely do that. I want to give a heads up too before we get out of here. The Stillwater School is going, and we actually have a spot that opened up. So if you're interested right now, send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, and just put Stillwater School in the subject line. These typically we have cancellations for various reasons that pop up, but right now we have one spot, and it's always good to get your name in because there could be another one that pops up. But if you're interested, check in with me right now. We're heading to the Henry's Lake area to fish some of the famous waters out there. Phil's going to be our guide. We're going to be out there with Drift Lodge. It's going to be an awesome trip. So if you want to get all of Phil's knowledge packed in basically a 3-day, it's 3 days guided on the water, and then it's 4 nights at the lodge. You check in with me. That's Dave@WetFlySwing, and I'll let you know if we still have that spot available. And that's where I'm going to leave it here. I am going to leave tonight's with a little bit of a quote, actually a real quote right here before we get out of here. So here's the quote, and then I'm going to let you get out of here today. The retrieves are erratic. You want to be with your fly, be the bug you're trying to imitate. They never move in a straight line. They stop, they start, they rise, they fall, they turn. All of those kinds of things. That's Phil Rowley. I love that quote because it reminds me of some other big guests we've had on the show in the past, but Phil obviously knows his Stillwater. So remember that. Retrieves are erratic. The bugs are not just on a simple, systematic boom, 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 boom. You got to be erratic. You got to find out what works. And I'm going to leave it there today on this short snippet episode. I hope you enjoyed that one, and I definitely look forward to catching you on the next one. If you like these short episodes, I know I've heard from a few people, just send me an email and let me know. That would be great. And until we catch you again, I hope you have a great morning, a great afternoon, a great evening, wherever you are in the world. And I hope you get on the water and have some success in Stillwater this year.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.